Okay, so we're looking at this next question here, which says define labor demand and explain the law of diminishing marginal returns in the context of hiring workers. Why does this law make the labor demand curve slope downwards? So we're talking about in the context of hiring workers. So the labor demand is first of all we need to remember one thing: who demands labor? It's businesses. Okay, the businesses are the one who demand labor, and also we have to remember the relationship between the wage rate and the labor demanded. Remember, it's an inverse relationship, meaning at lower wages, firms want to demand more workers. At higher wages, firms want to demand lower workers, less workers. Okay, so labor demand, as you can read here, refers to the number of workers that firms are willing and able to employ at different wages. Okay, number of workers that firms are willing to employ at different wage rates. So if the wage rate goes up, firms will be willing to employ less workers because there's a high wage rate, more labor costs. If the wage rate goes down, firms are going to be willing to hire more workers because lower wage costs. Okay, so that's the demand for labor demand. Okay, yes. Then the law of diminishing marginal returns. I believe we all remember this from microeconomics. Okay, remember what it says: the more variable inputs you put, while other inputs stay fixed, eventually your marginal product is going to start reducing. Now, here let's put more context in that. Okay. Yes. Remember, because with the law of diminishing marginal returns, you have got your factors of production, you've got labor, land, and capital. Okay, so you're assuming your land is fixed, meaning, for example, you have one factory. Okay. Your capital is fixed, meaning you have got a set number of machines. So let's say, for example, you have got a set three machines. Okay. So let's say land is fixed. In this context, let's say you just even have one room. Capital is fixed. You've got three sewing machines. So remember this, colleagues: three sewing machines, one room. If you hire the first worker, the output will be okay. Okay. One worker, three machines, they can use that machine efficiently. You hire a second worker and a third worker, three workers, three machines, one room, everything will still be going well. But the more workers you keep on hiring, colleagues, imagine you this room I'm talking about, let's say it's a 3 by 5 meter room. So your land is fixed and you've got three sewing machines. Now imagine if you have 10 workers in that room. What do you think can happen? What will happen to output? Mr. Manase, what do you think can happen to output? You've got a 3 by 5 room, three sewing machines, and now you've had 10 workers and you want to keep on increasing the workers. What will happen to your output eventually? Mr. Chiza? Yes. It's going to reduce because since there are three machines, the extra output each worker is going to bring is eventually going to start dropping. Okay. Each additional worker you bring, the extra output will start dropping. Why? Because if you have, let's say, more than 10 workers on three machines, the machines, one might even break down. Okay. So that's just to give you a context of this law of diminishing marginal returns. But this is here the definition. Okay. When a firm continues adding more workers while other factors of production are fixed, okay, such as machinery and factory space remain fixed, the additional output produced by each new worker will eventually decrease. So in that 3 by 5 room, where you've got three sewing machines, when you bring in the fourth worker, fifth, 6, 7, 8. The more you keep on bringing in more workers, the extra output you'll be bringing in is going to drop. And this will now start affecting the total output. Yes. Okay. So now the question is asking us to say, uh, what was this? What did the question ask? Why does this law make the labor curve demands slope downward? So the reason why this law makes the labor demand curve slope downward is because, let me just type it somewhere. Okay, so the reason why the law of diminishing marginal returns makes the labor curve slope downwards is because each new each new worker brings less extra output. Okay, so therefore for a firm, if colleagues, if every worker, each new worker is bringing in less extra output, would you want to increase their wages? No, you wouldn't. You would say that, okay, since this new worker is going to bring in less output, you would want to hire them at a lower wage. Okay, because what's the point of paying them a high wage when they're bringing in less extra output? Okay, so as each new worker brings in less extra output, okay, firms firms will want to hire them at lower wages. Okay. Now that's just a simple way of expressing it, but that's the whole concept behind this. According to the law of diminishing marginal returns, the more workers you bring in, the less extra output they bring in. Okay, so the less extra output they bring in, okay, it means they're not as valuable. Okay, so you want to hire them at lower wages. Okay, and also apart from bringing in less extra output, okay, they also bring in less extra revenue, the marginal revenue. Okay, because as the marginal product is dropping, also marginal revenue is also going to be dropping. So if each new worker is bringing in less extra output and less extra revenue, you are not going to want to hire them at higher wages. You want to hire them at lower wages. So that's why the law of diminishing marginal returns makes the labor demand curve slope downwards. Okay, because the extra output each worker brings is dropping, thus the extra revenue also they're bringing is also dropping. So you want to hire them at lower wages. Okay, any questions? Okay, what is the difference between change in quantity demanded of labor and change in demand for labor? Give an example for each. So first, let me illustrate this with the graph. Okay. This is our labor demand curve. This is the wage rate. This is the quantity of labor. So a change in demand for labor, a change in quantity demanded for labor, okay, happens when there's a movement along the demand curve. Okay, so let's say here it's 10. Okay, then the wage rate drops from 10 to 5. Okay. So here, this is a change in quantity demanded for labor when the wage rate changes. Okay, colleagues? This only happens when the wage rate changes. Okay, so a change in quantity demand occurs when the wage rate changes, meaning a movement along the labor demand graph. Okay, yes. For example, if the wage rate for construction workers falls from $20 to $15 per hour, this is a change in quantity demanded of labor. Okay. Then a change in demand for labor. This is now when you have a shift. Okay. The wage rate doesn't get changed, it's still the same. Okay. Then all of a sudden there's a shift. Okay. The wage rate has stayed the same, but the quantity demanded of labor increases, let's say from 5 to 10 there. This is a change in demand for labor. Okay. Yes. So um, change in demand for labor occurs when other factors apart from the wages causes the entire labor graph to shift, okay, either to the left or to the right. Okay. Yes. Any questions? Okay. So change in labor demand shift. Okay. Change in quantity demanded of labor movement along the curve. So one is affected by wage rate, the other is affected by other factors apart from wage rate. Okay, so these other factors can be number of firms in the industry. Okay, the number of firms increases, more firms, more labor that's demanded. Okay, price of other inputs, let's say capital, price of other inputs. When we talk about inputs, we're just talking about the factors of production. So, colleagues, if equipment or technology becomes cheap, what happens is this demand for labor will shift to the left. On the graph, it will show like this, shift to the left, like this green one here. Because since firms can now buy machinery that can replace actual workers, they won't need more workers. Okay. Yes. Even demand for the product. Okay. Demand for a product can increase demand for labor or drop it. If demand for a product increases, so we've said, okay, yes, if demand for a product increases, it means the firm has to produce more of that product. In order to produce more of that product, they need more workers. So they'll demand more workers. Okay. So these are some of the factors that can make the demand for labor increase or decrease. Okay. Number of firms, price of other inputs in terms of technology and equipment. Okay. What's the last one? Number of firms, price of inputs, and demand for the product. Yes. Okay. Okay. So yes, that answers the question. Okay. Difference in change in quantity demanded and change in demand for labor. Are there any questions here? Or they asked for an example. For example, if the demand for houses increases, construction companies may need more workers. Okay. So for example, let's say people are building. Okay. As we can see, people are building. So Construction companies, it means people will be hiring these construction companies to build. So now as the demand for houses increases, all right, demand for a product here, okay, this product in this case is houses. Demand for houses has increased. So it means a construction company now needs more workers so it can build more houses. Okay. So this example here is an example of demand of a product or a service. Okay. Yes. All right. Define labor supply. List two factors that cause a shift in the labor supply curve for a specific industry in the nursing profession. Okay. So labor supply is the number of workers that are willing to work at any wage rate. Okay. Number of workers willing to work at any wage rate. That is labor supply. Remember, there's a positive relationship between the wage rate and the supply of labor. Higher wages, higher supply means more people want to work. Okay. Lower wages, lower supply. It means less people want to work. Okay. So some of the shifters of this labor supply curve, all right, as we saw earlier on in the multiple choice questions, immigration. Okay, immigration can be a shift. Okay, because it means more people coming into a certain area. It means the labor force increases. There are more people in the market willing to work. Okay, yes. So immigration is one of the shifters. The second shifter I can say is also working conditions. Okay, if companies are offering good working conditions, especially these high-paying jobs, you hear they're good working conditions. You've got your own office, air conditioned, you receive allowances, you're allowed to travel. With such conditions, everyone will aspire to get that job. Okay, they'll be willing to go to school, get the qualifications, and start applying for those jobs. Okay, that's why I find the labor market is saturated because we have got a lot of people graduating who are fighting for the same jobs. Okay, because they know those jobs they are fighting with a 90% confidence level, you can say that the working conditions are okay. Okay. Now, jobs with bad working conditions, for example, these guys who collect garbage here. Okay. Unfortunately, you see how it is. They come in a truck, they're seated on the garbage, they are looking dirty and everything. Those are bad working conditions. No one is going to be willing to want to work there. Okay. Unless it's really, it's when it's in terms of a means of survival, then yes. Okay. Not to look down on them, but yes, it's in terms of a means of survival, you just have to do the job. Okay. But if you are given options, those are jobs you wouldn't want to do. Okay. So there are certain jobs where we know the working conditions are bad. No one is striving for those jobs. Okay. Uh-huh. Any questions, colleagues? So working conditions and immigration. Okay. Yes, those are two factors. Another factor is increasing the number of workers. Okay. In- Increase. It also falls in line somehow with immigration, but also if we look at it like this, a lot of a lot of people are going into university to get certain jobs. So as people graduate, every year new people are graduating. What is happening to the labor market in those industries? The labor market is growing. The supply curve is shifting now. It's increasing. Why? Because more workers are entering in. Okay, colleagues. Yes, that is. Yes, those are two factors that can affect the labor supply gap. Yes. Any questions?